Hello and greetings to wherever you're watching us from. Welcome to Sharia Briefs. This is where we make the law practical. I'm very excited about today's episode because we are going to talk about something that has been very much in our Kenyan space right now. That is customary marriages. In other words, I'll just use this term that's known for all of us. I'm Luo myself, but interestingly, we call it Rorashu. I'm sure you're aware about Russia. So in talk customary marriages, we just mean marriages that have been done the traditional way. I'm very excited because there's a lot we are going to talk about on that issue today. And with me today, we have my friend Mary. She will help us unpack what this is all about. And let me just allow her to already say hi to you guys.
Thank you, Irene. Hi, so good to see you again. I'm also excited about today's topic. Let's see what is wrong or what is right about customary marriages and their registration. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, Mary. So to just start us off, perhaps we first need to understand what exactly is a customary marriage and why are we even talking about it today? Yeah, So Mary, help us first appreciate that, because I think there's a very skewed up notion out here. The way people understand customary marriages is very different. You could ask Irene here today and you get a very significant different answer if you ask another person from another community. So Mary, please help us unpack what that means first.
Okay, thank you. So according to the law, the Marriage Act 2014, there are different kinds of marriages, and a marriage is defined as a voluntary union between two adults, a man and a wife, and then it takes different forms because it can be a Christian marriage, it can be a Hindu marriage, it can be Islamic, but today we focus on the customary marriage. Now, a customary marriage is a marriage that has been undertaken in accordance to your customs. Now, as Irene has said, she's Luo, I'm Kikuyu. So her customs may be different from my customs. I am a Kikuyu, so there is the Rurasho, but before that there are other rights. There is what we say Kuhanda Itege, there is the Rurasho, there is so many other things that we do in relation to stamping that people are married. So it really depends on your customs, whichever community you come from. I mean, customary marriages are as old as our African communities. And so if you want to see a customary marriage, it will always depend on their customs. So your customs define your customary marriage.
Wonderful. But Mary, I mean, that is very interesting, because if you're saying that customary marriages are as old as our African, culture, so why on earth would the parliament see the need to legislate in 2014 and now bring an act of parliament that now captures what we call customary marriages and defines what it is? Mary, help us understand, because if we had customary marriages in existence, my own parents are married according to the Luo custom. I have never seen a certificate. There was no church wedding for sure. So help us understand, why was there a need to legislate?
All right. It's a bittersweet situation because what Parliament was looking at is actually to regulate this space so that there is clarity as to whether you're married or not. You will agree with me that when it comes to inheritance and succession matters, as to whether you're married or not is so important. And there were so many cases where it wasn't clear whether you were married or not. Now, I want to appreciate that Parliament still kept the integrity or the structure of customary marriage, because even as we speak, as much as the Parliament in Marriage Act 2014 required that customary marriages are registered, they remained not monogamous but polygamous in nature.
Okay.
So that did not, change the integrity of a customary marriage per se. What they wanted the communities now to recognize is that there is a next step of registration, so that we can help the court define who was married, who was just cohabiting, who was a boyfriend, who is a baby mama, who just started the rights but never completed. So it is to assist the courts to define who went through the customary steps and who is now married and who is not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I get you right, you're saying that the whole intent for registration is mostly for the courts, so that a third party, or I mean, if this dispute if it ever became a dispute that goes to court, the court has a way of ascertaining that this was an actual marriage, that everything that needed to be done was done. Is that what you mean?
That's what I mean, because in the absence of registration, you see, once you register, you've assisted the court in a big way, because they already know you're a married woman or a married man, regardless of whether it was monogamous or polygamous. But if you have not registered, then it means that we have to call elders, we have to ask for evidence, we have to ask how far had you gone, you need to give us evidence, you need to give us photos, you need to, prove. And all this is possible by just showing that you have a certificate. And the burden of proving all that is now dispensed away with by just producing a certificate. That's why I'm saying it's a bittersweet situation, because it actually helps you and helps the courts when you define your status, whether it is by customary marriage or any other kind of marriage.
Okay, okay, wonderful. So I think I'm following, and I know this space, you guys will agree with me, it's a very heated space. But before we go into the heat, I'm telling you, there's a lot of heat coming up. Mary, help us understand, what exactly does the law say? Because now you've helped us understand and appreciate that we have a Marriage Act which now recognizes officially customary marriages. But what exactly about customary marriages? And what does that law expect of someone who is in that kind of a setting? Okay,
thank you for that. Now, in relation to customary marriage, the Act, again, 2014, remember it defined marriage and it ends by saying registered under this Act. So number one, it needs to be registered. In fact, there's an express provision that customary marriages need to be registered. I may also say that the 2014 Act expected that the marriages that had already been done under customary law would be registered within 6 months thereafter. Okay. Of course, the timeline is, changed and all that, but that was the idea behind the Marriage Act 2014 as far as customary marriages are concerned. So I have said, number one, it does not restrict the nature of what a customary marriage is. But the law goes ahead and says you need to register that customary marriage, right? Yeah. And in the absence of that, we will look at what that means and what evidence you must submit.
Okay. Yeah. So this registration, assuming I have completed all my law customary rights as far as marriage goes, how soon? Is there a timeline within which I'm expected to have this marriage registered? And what happens if I don't do it within that timeline? Help me appreciate that bit.
All right. Yes, there's a timeline. 6 months
from the date of
your customary marriage ceremony or whatever.
If it will be Rorasho, then it will be from the date of the Rorasho.
Yes, or Koito or the equivalent. So within 6 months, you should register. But you've asked a very good question as to whether there are consequences. Or whether you may register even beyond 6 months. And the answer is yes. It is not very strict because even your parents, for example, you've mentioned they are in a customary marriage. If they want to register today, they can register their marriage. So it is not to say that if you go beyond the 6 months period, then you are not able to register that said marriage. You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's good to know. So meaning that thankfully it appears as if the law does not penalize you for not registering within the 6 months, right?
It does not.
Very well. So before we get into the heat, we are now getting there. But I want Mary to help us understand because at least from my experience, I don't know about you, but many people I know actually will do this. They will do, for example, the kuhada itege in Kikuyu customary.
You've done well. Yes.
Yes, I'm trying. Yeah. They will do that. Then it will follow that Rorasho will be the next step. But ordinarily, in this Kenyan context, I usually see a white church wedding coming up after Rorasho. So, Mary, help us understand here. When we talk customary marriages, does it have a place and a space for a white wedding later to complete it, or at what point do we say now that a customary marriage is actually complete? And now for people who do, who actually do get married, like have a church ceremony, a wedding ceremony at the church, yet they have gone through these customary rites, Rorasho, Kohadaidege, and Koito, and whatever it is that happens in your culture. What does that mean? Help us appreciate that, because I think there's a lot of confusion and people don't don't seem to understand that perhaps they're engaging in two very different things at the same time. Please help us.
All right. There is a difference between the social life and the legal life.
Okay.
Because indeed, personally, I went through the ratio and everything, and then I went for church wedding.
Okay.
So as it stands, and that's your question, as it stands, I only have one marriage certificate, and that's a Christian marriage certificate.
Okay.
All right. So if you decide to do the traditional stuff and then thereafter go for church or to the AG, then whichever certificate you get speaks to the kind of marriage that you have as far as the law is concerned. Now, if you stop at the customary marriage, level, then you have already defined your marriage as customary. Okay. You have chosen for yourself that it's going to be customary. I'll tell you why some people would prefer to go to the next step. They want their marriage to be monogamous.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So if it is in your interest that your marriage is monogamous, at the same time you want to honor your parents traditionally, then it forces you to do the traditional wedding, the customary wedding, but you proceed to do the AG or the Christian marriage to make it monogamous. Because you remember customary marriage is polygamous. Yeah. But you still want to do that because you want to honor your parents, so to speak, in the African social setting, right?
Yeah.
So you do that for the people, but for your paperwork, you go the next step. And let me say, it is not a must for you to have a church wedding. If you're okay with the customary marriage, you can proceed and register that without any other ceremony. It's just that, as I said, our social setup is that you do your ratio, you do your coital, and then you do your wedding. But it's not a must if you're comfortable staying at the customary level.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that is very insightful. You'll agree with me, because it almost looks like once you do your ratio and you have not done a church ceremony for the Christians, that is. In fact, even your own church might fail to recognize and appreciate that you're married. So this might not be very legal, Mary, but I feel it's important. For those who profess the Christian faith, and we have already said that a Christian marriage is a type of marriage. The church wedding ceremony you see is a type of marriage under those many that are in the Marriage Act of 2014. So, Mary, would it now mean that for someone who professes the Christian faith and they stop at the customary level and not go for a white wedding, as we put it, are there any implications they are facing? I know this might not be very, very legal, but in the societal setup, would they be finding themselves in a situation where, legally speaking, they do have a marriage, it's customary, but because of their faith and the requirements of the church, which many churches want you to celebrate a Christian wedding ceremony, what would that mean for that kind of person?
Okay. Again, there's a social stand and the legal stand. Because I see people who have done customary marriages, they're living together, they have children, and the church is still asking them, when are you getting married?
Yes.
And yet they're already married, especially if they've gone ahead and registered that customary wedding. So maybe perhaps it's because as a Christian, I understand that the faith wants your marriage to be monogamous. Perhaps that's the reason. Perhaps it's because of the prestige that comes with the church wedding. They want to be associated with the celebration. Whatever the case is, they want you to get the blessings of God on the altar. Whatever the reason is, that's a social issue, not a legal issue. If you do a customary marriage and you get your certificate, you are married. But I dare say, now also I don't do ratio and coito and everything else, and I just go to church or to the AG, I am also married. I do not need to go whatever the traditional way needs me to do. In fact, it's just that with African culture, we just want our parents to bless us and all that. But I can take my husband to be and 2 witnesses, start the process, and get married. And I'll be married.
All I'll have done is simply dishonor my parents.
In quotes,
yes. And my church.
In quotes, yes. In quotes, yes. And you would have subscribed to, you have decided whether you want to go the monogamous way or the polygamous way.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hope you're learning so far. I am learning so much. And in fact, as we continue with this conversation, feel free to just drop in a comment there and say what you think about these things we are discussing about, because they're very critical. So now we get into the heat. And I will start by asking Mary. Again, this might not be a very legal issue. One, I would want to understand from her perspective, and you will share your perspective. Feel free to drop in a comment down there and say why you think this is the case. Why is it that most people, I'm sure Mary, you will confirm, I know many people who have done the customary rites, they have children, it's 10, 15 years later, even our own family members, for goodness sake, but they will not take the next step. Others actually know that registration is a requirement. Perhaps you're out there and you don't know. Now, today you will know that registration is a requirement. But there are people who know, but they've chosen not to do that, despite knowing. So Mary will help us understand why, number one, despite this Marriage Act being a 2014 act, that's over 10 years ago, clearly people are now more aware about this requirement more than they were then. Why is it that we still have a very slow uptake on registration? What exactly are people fearing? If you're in that kind of setup, I want to hear from you. What makes you afraid of, if it's being afraid, I don't know. What makes you hesitate to register your customary marriage? Number one. Then number two, Mary, as you respond to that in terms of what you think, now help us appreciate, what does it mean legally if you have not registered your marriage? Today, as we speak, what does that mean for you?
All right. I'll start with the first question. Why do people hesitate to register customary marriages? And they prefer come we stay.
Yeah.
Now, let me first of all say that I don't know, because I am married, but it's a social problem.
They're also married.
It's a social problem. People are afraid of finality. Yeah, and there are people who want to leave that door open as to whether we are married or not. They want to leave that door open. And I may not understand why, because it does not serve your interests at all. Because when it comes to matrimonial property, the first thing that you will be asked is, were you married? When it comes to succession, the first question will be asked, were you a wife, were you a husband? When it comes to, the issues to do with separation, issues to do with divorce, whether you were married or not matters a lot. And I do not understand why we do not go that direction as much as we should. Parliament must somehow wake up to the realities of our society and perhaps look at whether this law is very practical. Because I agree with you, the majority of us do not go all the way and register their marriages. And the question is why. But even as we ask why, perhaps the law needs to, come to the social setup and be in line with what is happening on the ground. Because when the law provides for A, but is not happening on, reality, then it's a problem, because it does not sort the issue that they hoped it would solve. The problem is still there. People are not registering. And now I go to your second question, like right now you've not registered your marriage. What does that mean?
Yeah.
It means that you are walking on very on very icy grounds, because the law as is has not changed. Perhaps it will change in future, and perhaps Parliament will be more alive to what is happening, in our lives as a society. But before that is done, the law is very clear that you need to register your customary marriage. True, it is silent as to whether it is void if you've not registered. It is clear that it is not a criminal act not to register, but that leaves a lot of room for interpretation by the courts. And you do not want to fall in the hands of a court that interprets the law to mean that your marriage is voidable simply because it was not registered. That leaves you at the mercy of presumption of marriage.
Mary, you are now getting technical here. So far, I have understood what you're saying about you having not registered.
Yes.
And you're talking about someone being in a scenario where they might find themselves in the hands of a court or a judge who treats non-registration to mean that the marriage is voidable. Pause. Explain to us, what does that mean? What does it mean to say that that marriage is voidable?
Okay, so what it means is that perhaps there was a marriage, perhaps there was no marriage. So it leaves the court not very sure whether there was a valid marriage or not. And it forces you to rely on evidence fully, right? The word is not void, it's voidable. Okay. That is to say there is a small chance that that marriage is valid, it was in existence, but there is also a chance that it was not in existence. Okay. Right? It was a form of marriage, but it wasn't a marriage. Yeah.
Okay. Then you have also mentioned that when now a dispute has come and you guys need to go to court for whatever reason, which Mary will explain to us, there are many scenarios that might have you now in a court setting, as Mary will help us understand shortly. But you've mentioned also leading that this scenario of non-registration might now lead to what we call the presumption state. Now help us understand again, what does that mean?
Okay, so as late as this last year, 2025, there was a case in the High Court that explains how to identify whether there was a marriage or not, as far as customary marriages are concerned. And the court called upon the party that was relying on a marriage being, in existence, to bring evidence. One, that they carried themselves as husband and wife. So he needed, actually it was a she needed to bring witnesses that would say, so and so carried so and so and so and so carried themselves as husband and wife for a long period. Number two, she needed to show the court that the rights of marriage or a customary marriage had been met. So she brought, photos of Mbuzi coming into the shed and all that. So she had to do that. Then she had to bring witnesses, the wazes that were in that sitting, right? That were talking and, discussing and, negotiating. So she had to bring some wazes to confirm that indeed there was the rurasho. It was actually a Kikuyu customary marriage. So that had to be done. Okay. So, as I said, the burden of evidence and the burden of proof now is heavier because there is no certificate. On the presumption, again, it becomes another leaf that they look at. And the presumption of marriage traditionally has been, people see you as husband and wife, you have cohabited for some time, all right? Perhaps you even have children. You have cohabited for some time, and this time must be reasonable. Now, as to what reasonable time is, the court defines what reasonable time is, but it has to be reasonable for a reasonable period. You see? It's a very tricky situation.
Clearly.
Yeah, and that's what you will be relying on, when you're saying that you are married and yet you do not have a certificate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. So what you have painted is a scenario where, for example, X and Y are divorcing, quote unquote. Now, in that kind of setup, what you're trying to help us understand is the kind of burden that will befall the person who's trying to actually show that we were married in the first place, simply because there's no certificate. I hope you're following. Yeah. So, number two.
Allow me to add, it's not just divorce issues, because, when people also feel like if we are not registered, I can just walk away.
Exactly.
And I do not need to go to court for divorce.
Yes.
But there's the divorce, then there is the matrimonial property. And that is very critical, because you have done investments with somebody, and perhaps the title is just in their names. You want a piece of that. You need to show that it's matrimonial property. It cannot be matrimonial property unless there was matrimony. There was marriage. So marriage is what speaks to what matrimonial property is. So the property issue is so important that you have a marriage certificate for you to defend your position as far as matrimonial property is concerned. Then there is the issue of, unfortunately, people pass on, people die. And you, my viewer, and Irene, you have seen some in-laws from hell, come and claim they do not know you.
Completely.
They don't know you. You were never married to their son or their daughter. And that is crazy. you have no certificate to show that you are married. So you may have a very good, devout husband who loves you, takes care of you. But what about the in-laws? They change, and it's a problem if you do not have a certificate. Yeah.
So then what would that mean? For example, if it was Irene, God forbid, that I found myself in that kind of situation, and now I am after my share of what I consider matrimonial property. But remember, we don't have a certificate. So all I can try to do is to first prove that I was actually married to X before the issue of matrimonial property division can even arise. So what would that look like for me in that kind of setting? Would I simply just have to walk away and leave everything I've worked for so many years?
Not quite. Yeah, it's not obvious because we've said you need to prove you're married.
Yeah.
You have a certificate? Well and good. You don't have a certificate? Ask the court to rely on presumption of marriage, or you need to just prove that you are married by cultural rights, right? If you pass that test, and the reason we're here, viewers, is to encourage you to register your marriage, because that is a huge test that you need to pass. If you pass that test, then you're recognized as a partner, you're recognized as a spouse, then now you can sit down and have that ticked that we were married. Then you go to the next step, which we will talk about maybe in another episode on contribution. Because unlike what people think, some people think matrimonial property is not 50-50. You must prove your contribution, right? Whether it is monetary or non-monetary. So you will not walk away empty-handed if you can prove by way of certificate, which is easy, or if you can prove by way of presumption, stroke evidence of cultural rights and etc.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. But I'm also wondering, so how about in a scenario where, God forbid, the husband has passed on, so you have no one to even challenge or prove that you are married to, he's died. Now we're in succession court, and you want a stake in the estate simply because you have worked hard for it, you're part of it. So what does that look like for someone like in that scenario?
All right. Again, the same thing happens because I suppose then in that scenario, it's the relatives are saying, you were never married.
We don't know you. We don't know you.
Then you need to show by way of a certificate. If there's no certificate, we go back to presumption of marriage, stroke evidence of cultural rights. If they're saying they do not know you, then it means there were no cultural rights. So you go back to presumption of marriage. And we've already defined what presumption of marriage looks like. Luckily, presumption of marriage does not just look at the rights, the cultural rights. It also looks at the aspects I've said. The period you cohabited, whether you carried yourselves as husband and wife, and the period was reasonable. And there are other small other aspects that we look at for the presumption, but those are the three that I can recall. So, as I said again, it's so important and imperative for you to register your marriage. It makes everything much easier.
Okay. Our viewers, I hope you have appreciated and actually understood the process. It's very simple, actually. It's not as complicated as most people think. As Mary has said, you'll just log in onto your eCitizen account, you'll have your spouse or partner prompted, you will get an appointment and a 21-day notice, and then you'll go to the office of the Attorney General, right? And you will sign that certificate in the presence of the Registrar of Marriages. And that's it. That's it. You'll have registered your marriage. But like she's saying, I really like what she's saying. Registration of a customary marriage only means that you, for example, both of you actually, I don't know whether we exercise what we call polyandry in Kenya, like one wife having, a woman having many husbands, I don't know. But what registration will actually do, it will have sealed your marriage as a polygamous marriage. You need to know that. So that once you sign that certificate, you've said to your husband, like Mary was saying, you're not stuck with me alone. If you ever want to marry someone else, it's fine, and our marriage will still remain valid. But I think that is where the tension lies. Most of us or most of you out there will hesitate to do that because, hey, who wants to be in that kind of open relationship? Okay, yeah, there are a few people who do, but really, yeah, it's really complicated. So you'll find that you're lying between a space where you don't want to register it. Now that you understand, it will only mean that you are in a polygamous officially recognized polygamous setting, but also your spouse is reluctant to go the civil way, because if you go to the AG, what we call marriage AG, if you go for that one, it means it's a monogamous setting. You've sealed the door and it's monogamous. Or if you decide to go the church way, that's a Christian marriage. It's also a monogamous marriage, meaning after that, you cannot, legally speaking, have another wife. So you see, I kind of try to understand. Mary, thank you. I think I've now begun appreciating the tension that most people find themselves in. So that if you ask me, as we now draw this class to a close, and I really want to hear what you guys have to say. If you ask me, I think that for those of you who are still stuck at, you have done your customary rights but have not registered. You've not registered under the customary marriage level, neither have you done the marriage, with the church wedding, so to speak, to make it a Christian marriage. It's because perhaps you're hesitating to finalize this thing. That sense of finality, now we are speaking now on a societal level, that sense of finality has not yet registered. You still want to leave the door open. I don't know, is that true? Do you agree? I would want to hear your thoughts. But one last thing, Mary, as we finish this up. You mentioned something very critical, that the parliament, the law, let me call it the law, that Marriage Act of 2014 seems to have either fallen behind. Is it that our culture or our societal setup is ahead of this law, or is it behind, so that the law is not doing what it was intended to do? So if today you are to be asked to recommend to Parliament an amendment that would now take into account the scenario we find ourselves in as Kenyans, that most of us are in come-we-stay relationships, we have children 15, 20 years down the line, but we just can't. It's not because we don't have, these things are not even expensive, but we won't just register. What would you tell the Parliament to do? What kind of recommendations do you think would now match the reality on the ground?
Okay. I would recommend to the Parliament to allow customary marriage registration to be voluntary.
Okay.
Right? So that I can register, but I don't have to. And that will save a lot of people, because they are in come-we-stay kind of marriages. And the courts have really struggled with what the law says right now versus what the society is. And that's why you've seen some courts agree to consider presumption and agree to look at evidence, and some courts just say, you know, your marriage is voidable, it was not registered, so there is no divorce to even to happen, there's no matrimonial property, and which is very dangerous. So I would say that let people register their marriages, customary marriages, if they wish. For those that do not wish, let us give timelines within which we can consider it a marriage. For example, if you have done the rites and you have stayed for, say, an year, all right? Let there be a period within which you have cohabited as husband and wife, then we shall assume that you are married, right? Yeah. We may not talk about children, because a marriage is complete with or without children.
Correct.
But I think we must reconsider that our setup is different from what the law says. The law has gone ahead and we have remained behind. And what the law intended to correct, it has not been able to correct, because we have refused, so to say, to adjust, right? So the law may need to reconsider and bring back presumption strongly, because as we speak, presumption of marriage is being discouraged. Even the courts are very slow to embrace presumption of marriage. So perhaps we need to go back to the presumption of marriage, embrace it, you know, agree that we would want a different scenario, but this is who we are. People don't want to register, you know, right? So that's what I would say to Parliament and in, you know, the future legislators.
That is brilliant, because really this whole idea of presumption, we don't even have a definitive number of years that would pass for a marriage. That reasonability test. Is it 5 years? Is it 3? Is it 10? Is it 15? So yeah, I agree that someone needs to actually perhaps begin talking about this and initiate that discussion, because it is true. I mean, it is what it is. We are who we are. So there's no need of having a law that
it's not helpful.
It's not helpful. It's not helping anybody. Yeah, so we have come to a close. I really hope you've learned one or two things. I hope that if you are our target audience and you find yourself in that scenario, you have now known what you ought to do so that you avoid all these kinds of problems that might befall you later when death happens, when disputes arise. Yeah, so we encourage you, as Mary rightly stated, the whole point of us sitting here today and just discussing this is to enlighten you so that you may be able to decide your way out of whatever situation you're in and see the way forward. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. Mary, please say goodbye to our viewers as we draw this to a close.
Thank you so much, viewers. It has been a pleasure having this discussion. Let us hear from you, your questions, your comments, and if this information has been helpful, please share it to another. We will also share our details, our contact details on the comment section. Karibuni sana next time. Thank you.